Okay, I hit record. I'm on with Jay, the great J Thorn, the Godfather of the podcast. You are. Don't shake your head. No,
I'm
you are.
grimacing over here.
You are the reason that all of this happened. So send your complaint letters to J Thorn at. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, man, thanks for coming back. On the podcast. So you're on because you reached out to me and you're like, hey, I've got this cool thing. Um, and I was like, let me try it. And I tried it and it was amazing. So we want to talk about it. I could try, it is a diagnostic. I could try to explain it, but I'm going to let you explain it because I'm going to screw it up.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me back on the podcast. I always enjoy talking to you.
Dude, you have an open invitation, right? Like the Godfather podcast just gets to say, like, I'd like to come on and talk about this. And I'll be like, let's do that. Yeah.
All right, man, cool. I think we'll probably get into more of the strategic stuff and big picture thinking later, but as you said, let's just jump right into it and tell people what this is all about, and I'll explain later how I came across this. But essentially what I've been able to do is I've combined the three-story method process with the power of AI analytics. So in layman's terms, what I've done is I have trained Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini to become developmental editors in the three-story method approach. That's basically how it works. And after I've trained them, I then trained them on the story rubrics, which folks might remember was a sort of a spin-off of three-story method. So I taught it what three-story method was, taught it how to analyze a manuscript, and then generate a format in the story rubric format, I guess. And it can do that in, probably better than I can at this point, and we can talk about why that's the case. But yeah, it's a really powerful tool, and I think if you are in a phase of your writing career where you are valuing that sort of objective analytical feedback, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I wasn't even going to talk about it. I wasn't even going to try and put it out there as a service unless it blew me away. And it blew me away.
That's awesome. So, just to like cover some terms, because you and I know what we're talking about, but because anybody doesn't know, three-story method, a book you and Jack Bohannon wrote that breaks story on multiple levels down to conflict, um, conflict, choice, and consequence.
Yep.
And I talk about it all the time on the podcast. I'm constantly using conflict, choice, and consequence on the podcast, but I don't know if people actually know where that comes from because I'm trying to think. I was like, when was the last time I actually attributed Jay's work? So I apologize. I should do that more often.
Hey, you're a certified editor. You don't
I
have
am.
to.
I am. I'm a certified three-story method editor. So yeah, so it breaks down this diagnostic. How so? Man, how do I ask this question? So how what you've done, I use a lot of large language learning models with my day job. I use them to brainstorm with, and I'm constantly playing with them.
Yep.
How easy slash difficult do you think what you just built was for somebody? Because my gut says like the beautiful combination of AI as a tool is that it needs an expert like you to train it to do what you just trained it to do.
As of right now.
As of right
So
now. We're talking about right now. Like we can talk
we're
about the
talking
future
about
where AI
January
like reads our
2025.
brains and is like, never mind, I don't need you at all. But yeah, as of right now. So would you mind talking to me a little bit about the process, not giving away your secrets, but the process of like how easy slash hard was it for you to train a large language learning model to do this thing that you're an expert in?
Yeah, man. There's really no secrets. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
free to I'll talk about this at whatever level of detail you want because I think it's something. It's a skill set or it's an approach that's applicable in different industries and for different projects, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So where we are right now, let's give folks a lay of the land as of January 2025. We're a little over 2 years past the launch of ChatGPT 3, which is what sort of kicked off this entire generative AI thing that we're in right now. So if you've been living under a rock, the past 3 years, you're probably have no idea what's going on here. But
It's
we're a
weird
little
to
over.
say that, but I understand that you and I are also kind of obsessed with this stuff. So I'm glad you're
Yeah,
breaking down this history. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I have to give credit to Joanna because she was the one who kind of pulled me in and really she was sort of dabbling in a lot of the AI stuff prior to the GPTs when it wasn't that good. And every time
Mm,
she would tell me about it or show me something, I would be like, no,
yeah.
no, or it was clunky, it was odd, it was not very good. And then Chat GPT and she showed me that and I mean, long story short, I spent the past 2 years daily. I mean, it's a part of my workflow now.
Mm,
Hours every day. I launched, ran, and subsequently sold an AI creative AI digest newsletter. Like
hmm
I'm way deep into it. And so what what people perceived as the competency of Chat GPT when it first came out was that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all right. It can't
Feels like a
write good.
neat parlor trick
Yeah,
when it first
yeah,
came out. Yeah.
exactly. And if you haven't been following it or you haven't been using it and you kind of walked away or turned your nose up at it 2 years ago, if you came back now and used something like Chat 4.0 or Claude Sonnet 3.5, you would be in for quite a surprise.
hmm
I would say out of the box right now, it's probably writing better than 95% of all writers who are alive today.
Mm,
And I don't think it's stretched to say in another year or two it will be better than any writer who has ever lived
mm,
because it is ingesting the entire canon of published and unpublished literature. They're throwing billions and billions of dollars at this. And so the people who came out, when it first came out, they're like, yeah, I tried it, but it doesn't write very good. I'm like, well, maybe 2 years ago, but we're in a completely different place now.
It
So
is
what I
crazy
sort
how
of,
fast it's
yeah,
moving. It's wild.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and to be honest, like this service that we're talking about today, this might not exist 6 months from now.
Yeah.
Like like I see it, it's moving so fast, and so I'm going to get to I'm taking a very long trail here to your question. So right now we are in a place where if you have some expertise in some domain, you have a window of time. It might be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. I don't know. I'd say it's probably shorter than longer, but you have a window of opportunity where you are going to be able to use AI as a tool better than quote unquote a layperson, right?
hmm
So I have an extensive knowledge in story structure. I've worked with literally thousands of writers on manuscripts and coaching and communities
hmm
and all that and conferences and stuff. So what I'm able to do is I can take all of that wisdom, all of that experience, all of those reps, including the book that I wrote with Zach,
hmm
and I can put that into the AI and quote unquote train it.
Yeah.
So that gives me an edge over someone who just randomly comes to it and says, "Edit my book," and then it's
hmm
sort of this wishy-washy command, and it defaults to sort of a safe middle ground. Whereas I'm literally training this AI. Now,
Yeah.
eventually, what's going to happen is it's not going to be need to be trained, and then the service that I'm offering and my skill set will be obsolete, and
hmm
and that like that could be a year. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, so essentially, what I'm saying now is if you have that history or you have that experience behind you, like you do with dialogue, like you still now have an opportunity to go to Chat GPT and say, here's my approach to writing dialogue.
hmm
Here's what makes it effective. Here's what makes it clunky. Look out for this kind of stuff. And then you can, after you've taught it, then you can set it loose and say, now analyze this or analyze this
Yeah.
or analyze this. So that's at a high level, that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's, I'm excited about that. Because I think it's a tool that we can all be using. Um, I know right now, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. I know right now there are people like doom and gloom, woe is me, this is the death of books. I don't agree with that, but I'd love to know how you feel about it.
It might be.
Yeah. Talk about that.
They might be right. I think it's going to be the death of books as we've known them. I
Hmm.
think those of us who became adults prior to Chat GPT, yeah, we're gonna lose some stuff that
Yeah.
that was part of our upbringing, part of our childhood. No question about it.
Yeah. And I guess
Nobody.
no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but like no one really knows. I mean,
Yeah.
I've sort of theorized that I think the end game is that entertainment itself is completely transformed, and that it is highly customized, individualized, and
Mm,
instant. I
yeah.
think that's where it's going. That doesn't mean people won't want to read books written by other people. I'm not saying that, but I'm talking about like if you look at sort of the mainstream or mass entertainment,
Yeah.
things like movies and songs and books, uh, not only are they going to be indecipherable from human created art, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
And the AI is going to be able to the AI is going to be able to look at every book that it knows you've read, and it's going to be able to instantly generate a book you're going to
You can
love,
like,
Jeff.
yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And I think there's so like, in my day job, we talk about this a lot. And it's like, okay, there's two things that are keeping us safe right now. One, there's no real money in what we do. So you're talking about movies and stuff like that. That's in way more danger than writing books because the truth is there's not a lot of money in writing books. So AI is going to chase the money first because the people running it have to pay off these billion-dollar loans that they've
Well,
got.
it's going to be video games that go first
Video games
because
first,
that's
yeah.
where the big
That's
money
where the big
is.
money is. And then the second thing is there anything that like the one of the reasons I'm still like optimistic about human authors is that if you're writing to a system, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But because that's where it excels. If there's a system that it can master, it's going to master it better and faster than you are.
Like old school rapid release 50
Write fast, publish,
books,
release. Here's the
that
yeah.
process is over.
Here's the genre, nail these genre tropes, be as close to the other books as you possibly can, make your covers look like other covers. Like just do that kind of that area is in trouble. But
Yep.
with if they're not using AI, because they just won't be able to keep up the speed. But if you're being weird and uniquely yourself, I think Godin says this, like be as human as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And there's more safety in that than there is. I'm not saying it's totally safe. I'm saying there's more safety.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
In my
too,
opinion. That's just my
yeah,
opinion.
no, I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think
Yeah.
we have to make a distinction between writing and publishing as a commercial enterprise versus an artistic expression,
Yeah.
right? Like Rick Rubin's newest book. I mean, it's came out last year or something. I mean, he basically said, "Don't quit your day job." He
Yeah.
basically said, like, use your day job to fund your artistic expression
Yeah.
because not only is there no guarantee, but there's no way of even knowing, if anything is going to hit or not. And so if you're sitting there thinking like, I hate my day job. If I can just publish 10 books this year, that's going to get like those days are gone. That's over.
And by the
Sorry.
way, those days weren't even here that long. That's
And
the
then they weren't here for
thing.
everybody.
They weren't here for everybody, and they weren't here that long, and they were here for like a decade. And then, maybe two, depending on kind of when you mark that like indie publishing gold rush starting. But that, like everybody's always said, it's a bubble.
Yeah.
And it's a market bubble, and that market bubble like just got a giant needle to it with
Yeah.
Chat GPT. And yeah, and
Yeah.
like you're talking, I am personally shocked. We're just laying it all on the table today, right? We don't care. I am personally shocked that you can write me emails if you're really mad at me about saying this. I'm personally shocked that Amazon hasn't put out a tool yet, like you're describing. That's like, hey,
Yeah.
these are the books you read. Give us like here's a multiple choice thing, like A, B, C, and D. I'm going to ask you five multiple choice questions about what kind of characters you want. Here's five themes we've seen you like. Which ones do you want to focus on? Here's a book. Have fun. Like I'm really shocked they haven't launched. I've seen some side companies launch it. I'm shocked Amazon hasn't launched it yet.
You know, that doesn't sound so crazy anymore, does it?
No, I it really well, I've seen people doing it. Like I've seen books, and usually they're writing books in like or I need to, while we're talking, I'm gonna look it up because I need to get the name of the company so I'm not just like saying it's happening, but I'm not gonna give you any evidence. The company that's doing that I played with for a while just to look at. I tried to bring them on the show, by the way, and they never came on. So if they hear this, too late. No, I'm just kidding. Come on, I'd talk to you about it. Um, they Telthi is what they're called. Their stories are like they give you like 2,000 words at a time, and then they ask you another question like, which way do you want it to go? And it is like a adult choose your own adventure type story. But I was, I was. They've gotten better and better the longer they've been around, and I'm
Well,
yeah.
I mean, let's just put the dagger in the heart of everyone listening. It is,
This is the saddest dialogue doctor episode of all. I'm just kidding. It's not.
yeah,
It's
I know
exciting.
this
I'm
is
just
gonna,
teasing. Yeah.
this is gonna make some people cry. But
Well,
I
they're
mean,
not listening anymore.
Alta, yeah, I've already turned on
They're done.
AI on my manuscript. I'm out.
Yeah.
Uh, no, like I've thought about this. I think we're shifting into an era of curation instead of creation because AI is going
Mm,
to outcreate everyone and everything. So if you think about the old paradigm, you got clout if you wrote a good book and word of mouth and people spread it. And then other people wanted to read it. And so it was still humans sharing art together. Because that was the other
mm,
pushback I got against some of my earlier ideas about AI taking over entertainment is people would say, oh, yeah, but humans still like to share art and experience together. So they're not just going to want to sit on their couch and read their own personalized novel. I'm like, yes, but you're not taking it out to the full conclusion, which is if I sit down, I'm a tastemaker,
hmm
and AI generates the novel according to my tastes. Now my tastes are competing with your tastes. And so I am now sharing the novel that AI generated for me, and I'm going to other people, and I'm like, man, this is really good. Like, you're going to love this. My AI made this. So instead of me as the author getting the clout, it's me as
Yeah.
the curator getting the
Getting the
clout.
clout.
So in your situation, if Amazon releases some kind of auto book generating tool,
hmm
it is totally going to put many authors out of business because people then will instead of promoting or word of mouth an author, they're
Yeah.
going to promote or word of mouth or share their AI generated story.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I think, depends on like, I think a lot of times we talk as readers as a monolithic force. Like there are readers, and that's not true. There are lots of different types of readers. There are, sci-fi readers that read, 100 sci-fis a week. Those people are going to be very easy to cure, not a week, a year, 100 sci-fi novels a year. Those people are going to be very easy, and they are the reader that drives the like write fast, publish, repeat industry. That type of reader that read in a specific genre that only read that genre, maybe drift from that genre a little bit, but they like are pounding that genre, and Kindle Unlimited was built for them. And those are the ones that like they have such a curated base of work of what they like or what they don't like. It's so clear that they're going to be very easy to write books for, like AI to write books for. My wife reads like 4 books a year. They are usually handed to her by a person who like can be like, hey, this was like New York Times bestseller. Oh my gosh, 100,000 people have read this. You should check it out. AI is going to be harder to create a book for her, right? Like but genre writers are hard to create a book for her. Like she doesn't read genre books either. So it's like, or like me, like I read 60 to 70 books a year. Um, they tend to be Pulitzer winners or nominees, right? Like because I like that. I like the heavy theme, high concept, weird books that don't match formulas. That's what I enjoy. Um, I'm going to be a little harder to create a book for, not impossible, but a little bit harder, right? Like
Yeah.
so I think there's scale to it, but it all goes back to like what reader are you targeting right now? and what reader is AI going to be really great at targeting,
Well,
or
and
is
what
really
out
great at targeting? Not going to be, but is really great at targeting right now.
no, and
Yeah.
what outcome do you want? Like
Yeah.
I
What are
think
you going
that
for?
I really think that that glimmer of hope, if we've stuck a dagger in the hearts of your listeners, the glimmer of hope is if your expectations are in alignment with if your expectations are in alignment with where the industry is, you'll be fine. Like
Yeah.
if you're like, I want to work on one or maybe two books a year. I love the writing process. It makes me feel good when I finish. If I can have a couple copies and go to my local library and have a little book group about it, that's great. Like
Yeah.
that is not going away. Like
No.
that will be here, I would say, for the long haul.
Forever.
Again, it comes back to like if you're thinking like rapid release model, straight up genre tropey kind of stuff, like quit. You might
Yeah.
as well quit because you're going to lose. Like there's no,
Well,
it's already almost impossible to get any organic eyeballs on an Amazon platform. So if you're driven by the money or the commercial enterprise of it, I think that's what you're going to have to let go of.
and I think it's an interesting thing because like AI is causing it for us, but this happens in markets all the time.
Oh
Like
yeah,
when I was in church work, when I started, this was 25 years ago, church work was in a bubble because we'd had some big tech innovations, specifically how you can produce sound and the things you can do with video and how you can stream a service. And it allowed you to move from everybody being in the same room to either having multiple rooms that are synced or producing things online or like, so we had this big tech change. And before, right at the cusp of the tech change and before the tech change, if you played the right music and had the right kind of speaking and had the right kind of, you know, approach and you were in the suburbs, you were kind of guaranteed to get 400 to 500 people showing up to a room and you had the potential to grow it to 20,000. Right? Like it was called the church growth model. It was something that everybody studied. We had it down to a science. It was great. It was so down to a science that one of the big guys even made a joke video about it of like, here's me talking generically about how to produce a church service. Got him in huge trouble. He like people
this
freaked
is
out
the
about it.
heyday of the mega church, right? This
Heyday
is
of the
kind
Me-
of where that
This
comes
is what
from.
made mega churches in America.
Yep.
This is what made it was a system they were following. Those were the early adopters. And then there was a whole slew of people that followed that got churches that like because before this churches were like parish model, right? Like
Right.
now that model flooded the market and it doesn't work anymore. You can
Yep.
do it and people kind of expect it. They're like, oh, you're not doing the model. Like, so consumers have become critics. They show up and they're like, I don't, but like there was a whole season of kind of sadness where it was like this, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do in my church is still like 50 to 70 people. And why are we not taking off like we're supposed to take off? And now people still do the model. They still talk about the model. They still obsess over the model. But if you didn't get in on that like bubble, when it was working, it doesn't start as a like kickoff thing anymore. So like this is how market bubbles work, right? Like I could go through like I had a small stint in the real estate industry. The same thing happened there. There was like a market bubble and it popped and it but there was a season of like a 15-year season in America where it was like if you got your real estate license, welcome to being a millionaire, right?
Yep.
Like that's like that was the promise of like, if you get your real estate license and you follow the formula, welcome to being a millionaire. But that doesn't exist anymore. Like that's not
No,
true.
and
Yeah.
to connect it, you're absolutely correct. Like the self-publishing, the gold rush, the KDP gold rush days, or whatever you want to call them, like those were on its deathbed before ChatGPT came out. So ChatGPT
Yeah.
just kind of put the last nail in the coffin. It
And
didn't
they're on the
cause it.
deathbed because it was flooded. Like demand
Yeah.
had been overwhelmed by the supply.
Yes.
And you can tell that's happening in a market when participating starts to cost money. So
Yes.
like so anyway, I'm saying all that to say like I don't want anybody to freak out like, oh my gosh, this is something that's never happened in the world before. This is a different way it's happening.
Yeah.
But these are market dynamics. This is how economics works. Like new tech shows up. Sometimes that's the car engine versus the horse, and all of a sudden the horse industry is like, oh shit, we're in trouble. Nobody's buying horses anymore. So
No,
it's
and
like a yeah.
you're absolutely, I mean, you're right on, because when I was got into this in 2008, 2009, to your point, you could put up a free book. You could have very little promotion. I mean, just sort of, hit an email list. That all the downloads on your free book in KDP would catapult you up into the list. You would come off the free list, and in those days, you ported directly over to the same rank on the paid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So not you got paid to be part of the game. And
Yeah.
then over the course of 10 to 15 years, and where we are now, is you have to pay to play in the game, which is, if you're not using paid advertising, it's going to be virtually impossible for you to sell a book on Amazon.
And that's when I can't. And the problem is, so now we're just complaining about the market, but I don't care. We're just going to go. The problem is, market advice always lags a couple years behind what's happening in the market.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so when I came in 2014 into the market, like published my first book, I was given the advice that you were describing that was working in 2009.
Yep.
Hey, put up a free book. That free book's going to take off. It's going to translate in all this stuff. The truth was, at that time, you needed to be buying Amazon ads to get seen. And you needed to be heavy on social media to get seen. You needed to be starting a Facebook page. You need to be doing these things. And there were kind of rumbles of that when I started, but it was like, hey, this person is doing this thing that is not necessary, but man, look at it. They're taking off. That's really cool. The truth was, no, that was a necessary thing you had to do to get noticed at that moment.
Right.
But that's not the advice that was proven. So it wasn't the advice that was being sold by people like me who sell advice to authors. So there's a like, look, I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. I recognize the hypocrisy in some of my conversations. But so anyway, there's that turn from like the market. So like right now, tons of people are always talking about book talk. It's not too late to get on book talk. I mean, we're not going to talk about current legislation at the moment. It's not too late to get on book talk.
Who's saying it's not too late?
So, dude, people are saying it. I'm telling you. Okay. And they're like, here's how you do it. Here's how you get on. Here's how you go. And like, look, man, you're like 3 years like out of that being. Now, I'm not saying you can't sell books on book talk.
Right.
But I'm saying the promise of the skyrocket career, you're about 3 years out of that. And that's the problem with market advice, is that the people that do it, by the time they've proved that it works, it's likely been added to, or other people are commercializing it already. And so there's a,
Yeah, man. And I'll tell you, like, for me, I'll talk about me personally, because I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think it was, I can honestly say this. I think you can back me up on it. I'm kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of stuff. It's just how I'm wired.
Yeah, I'd say you're like a year ahead of everybody else, has been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been that way, for better and worse. Like, I've been burned sometimes, so I'm not saying that makes me superior in any way, but like I'm usually out front. I'm usually on the cutting edge, which means I bleed sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think in a strange way, where I am now is where I think a lot of authors might be in another year or two. It's not defeat or resignation. It's an embrace. It's a re-embracement. I'm totally making that shit up now.
No, that's a great word, and it exists, and we're claiming it.
Okay.
A re-embracement.
So it's a re-embracement of why I started doing this in the first place. So like I have 2 complete trunk novels that are sitting on a hard drive. I have numerous other stories that I've written over the past couple of years. I might never publish them, because I went back to, why am I doing this in the first place? It's because I love to write, and I'm using the AI tools to do that. And I've led the commercial expectation, because the truth is, and this has been true the whole time, but it's been something that really wanted to talk about, myself included. This is a terrible business model. Even in 2009, writing and publishing books is a terrible business model. The profit margin is razor thin. Yeah. The amount of work that you have to do to sell anything, it's insane. Like, if you're going to build a mailing list, sell a $1,000 service. Don't sell a $2.99 product, like, because you got to do the same amount of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta tell you, this is I haven't shared this on the podcast, but I had a friend come to me and ask me to do executive coaching because I have a 20-year history. I've been writing books and doing I've been writing books for 10 years. I've been editing for three and a half, but I've been doing change management and organizational development for 25 years. And so he came to me and was like, "Hey, can you coach some of my sales guys? Do you like put on your change management hat and coach some of the sales guys in what you're doing?" I'm like, "Okay." I get paid for an hour of being on the phone with those guys. I get paid twice what I get for like 5 hours of editing. And it's just like, you
Uh-huh.
know, I love editing. I love working with authors. It's beautiful. It's fun. I like seeing them do their stuff. But what you're saying, I think, is 100% true. Like if you're looking for the money, the like writer market sucks. So there's you know, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it really is. And like I thought, like, I stumbled upon, from all the writing and AI work that I'm doing, I kind of stumbled upon this little manuscript diagnosis thing, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And like, if you are still in that mode where I want to write, I want to grow, I want to become better, I'm not concerned about selling a million books or quitting my day job. I just want to become a better writer. I love
Mm,
storytelling. I was like, this is a great little thing. And again, it might not be here forever. And you know what? If I make a few bucks on the side, like, great. But like, I'm not
yeah,
talking, I'm not here talking, I'm not doing the podcast tour. You're not going to hear me anywhere else. I'm not doing content marketing. I'm not putting out TikTok dancing videos promoting this thing. Like,
yeah,
I'm listing it on Fiverr and I'm talking to you, and that's kind of it. Like,
yeah.
I sent an email to my list, which I hadn't even said anything to since like last June or something. And I'm like, if a few people think this is really cool and it helps them out, great. It compensates me for the time and coming up with the idea. But like, there's not much more to it than that. Like, you know, I I think folks like you are gonna weather the storm because you're providing a place for authors to gather. And it might not always be physical, it might be a
Mhm.
virtual community or a combination of the two. But your business model is more likely to last longer than if you are someone who's just a traditionally, not traditionally, a conventional editor,
Yeah.
like a proofreader, a developmental editor, where you take a manuscript and you write up an editor's letter and you send it to a client. Like, if that's your business model, good luck with that. That's all I got to say at
And
this
I gotta
point.
tell you, I've even changed how I edit in this same way. And I tell people now, I'm not an editor, I'm a coach.
Yeah.
Because like I just finished a book for a guy. It's a nonfiction book. He's very passionate about it. He's very excited about it. It's on like a hot political topic. Um, Rather than taking his manuscript and giving him like the editor letter back with the editor, I did the first 10,000 words. He and I sat down for an hour. We talked about them. We talked about what he wanted. I talked to him about what I was seeing. I was like, okay, before I progress as an editor, how much of this do you want me to change? How much of this do you want me to keep? And then like we went back. We did it. His book was 170,000 words total. And he was like, well, I want to get it traditionally published. I told him right away, I was like, then this has to be down to 60,000 words. And I was like, how do you feel about that? He's like, yeah, I that's what I want. I was like, great. I'm changing my editing style. We're going to go into this, like, I'm going to get brutal. And we got it down to 60,000 words and he's super happy with it. But
Yeah.
that's a very different thing that I'm doing there than the traditional, like, you send me the manuscript, you pay me half, I give you back edits, you pay me the other half. Like, it's just a different, it's more coaching than it is editing. And for me, I'm like, and the truth is, I can use when I was writing an early writer, because I want to get to how people, now that we've destroyed the market, I want to get to how people, why what you're doing is super beneficial. When I was an early writer, what I needed wasn't edits, I needed perspective.
Correct.
When I was writing my first books, when I wrote my first, like I joke on here all the time about how I wrote a series that nobody read, which we're going to look at in a minute on what you gave me as a diagnostic tool
We've
on the
all been
first
there,
book.
brother. We've all
Dude,
done that.
I loved it. it was a great learning experience. It was wonderful. Some people read, I did actually have I think I sold like 1,200 copies of the first book total. And then but by the time I got to book five, I think literally five or six people have read that book.
Yeah,
Like, and I see now as somebody who does a ton of editing, looking back on the series, I was like, oh, I can tell you exactly why and where they stopped reading.
because you have the
Um,
earned perspective
because I
now.
have their own perspective. What I needed when I started writing was perspective. I needed somebody to go, hey, here's what's going on. And so, like you're saying, if you're able to give people, like if you're offering an author service, we're talking to a very unique group of people now. If you're on like 5% of the podcast, if you're offering an author service, perspective is super important. That's what
Hmm.
you're actually bringing is your human personalized perspective on your expertise on a thing, which again, like you're about to show us, AI can do. So it's that, yeah. Anyway, but so let's talk about your service. Anything else you want to say about the market before I transition us? Because
No, that's good, man.
okay, because now we've murdered everybody and they're all like, "I'm dying." So let's talk about what this is actually like. What I see your service doing. Um, what I think is beautiful about what you're offering. So, a paying somebody like me for perspective is really expensive because you're paying me by the hour in essence. And so I'm not really expensive. I'm actually fairly cheap, but I'm not as cheap as what you're about to do, what you're about to show us.
No,
So
and I don't even do it anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's that like, getting me and two, I'm going to be slow. Getting me to read your whole novel, it like I'll get back to you in a month. Like it's like I'm not, so anyway, I'm really slow, but I think what you're doing gives that perspective from an expertise opinion that can really help any writer who's finished a manuscript because it allows you to sit back and go like, okay, I recognize that I'm not write fast, publish and repeat this thing. Like if you've sold into that, if you're like, I'm creating art, I want art, but I also want it to be good and I want people to enjoy it and I want to know how it fits and how it works. This service is beautiful because it's like, hey, let me give you a diagnostic on what's going on.
And I'll tell you
Yeah.
what we can do. Maybe we can finish with a rapid fire anticipated question list because
Oh,
I've already started getting some. I know what they're going to be, and I think
nice.
it's. I would rather just be completely open about those, because I know
Okay.
what they are. But let's save that for last.
Okay, let's save that for last. Can I show the reports now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up the as I show the reports, you explain exactly what happens in the service.
Yeah. So there's a couple. There's several tiers, but it's all the same thing. So like, this is not a conventional editing service. Therefore, I'm not charging by the word. So people might find that bizarre that there's no, like, basically up to about 100,000 words is what these models can handle. So it's the same whether it's 10,000 or 100,000, because it takes me the same amount of time to do it, whether it's, a short story or a novel. But essentially, you get Chat GPT to analyze it. The middle tier is Chat GPT and Claude doing a separate analysis, and then the third one is those two, Gemini comparing them, and then unlimited follow up questions to any of the
That's the
models.
questions. Yeah, let me find the right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm showing the wrong thing. That's the follow-up questions. That's the comparison. Here's ChatGPT. So, um, yeah, and the nice thing is you give the diagnostic in the rubric they used to do. I must say, Claude is much more my reader than ChatGPT. Claude liked my work much better.
Claude was softer on you.
Claude was much nicer to me. I like Claude. Thank you, Claude. ChatGPT, you and I are gonna have words.
Now, I want to mention too that the story rubric that you're seeing right now that's Creative Commons licensing. You can go to the Author Life and you can get the story rubric for free. You don't
yeah,
even have to give an email address. You can grab the story rubric, and in fact, you can take the story rubric and you can use it commercially. Like if you're an editor and you want to use the story rubric for your clients, have at it. It is Creative Commons licensing. So what you're seeing now is that exact rubric. But again, what I did was I trained the AI on three story method, and then I
yeah.
walked it through step by step this rubric. So and even like in the weeds on this, it doesn't come out of ChatGPT looking like this, and that's where my work comes in.
Yeah, you have to format it
Every
this way.
section,
Yeah.
I'm asking it. I'm getting what it says. I'm putting it into this nice, clean format
Yeah.
for you as the author. So that's kind of where my work comes in. I'm almost like the director of this. And as I say in the service, I don't read the manuscript. I'm being completely honest with you. I
Hmm.
am not going to read your manuscript. Essentially, what I'm doing is I'm having the AI read it, and then I'm having it generate this. And some
Yeah.
of the reason for having both ChatGPT and Claude, and then eventually Gemini, compare them if you want, is that it should minimize a lot of inaccuracies or allow you as the author to spot inconsistencies between those models.
Yeah. So let me talk about can I talk about the results for a second?
Yeah, yeah, please do. Mm-hmm.
So you sent me this one by Claude, this one by ChatGPT, and
Those are identical format. They're just went
identical
into two
formats.
different
Yeah,
AI.
two
Yeah.
different AIs, and then the summary of like, hey, here's where they agree, here's where they disagree.
And that was by Google's Gemini.
Google's your mind. Yeah. So let me just say, like, the novel I sent you is the first novel I wrote and published. It's it's problematic. Not problematic. I'm gonna get canceled. It's not problematic in that it's problematic in that like if somebody were to send it to me as a developmental editor now that I've been doing this for 10 years, I'd be like, hey, this has issues.
This
Like
has a
we
lot
got
of work
this
to
has a lot of
do.
work to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would actually put it at like a C plus, B minus, but I'm a pretty hard critic. And I'm not looking for like a write fast, publish, repeat. That wasn't what I was. I mean, at the time, that's what I thought I was doing, but I misunderstood what that was. That's a different story. But looking at it now, it doesn't fall into that. It's not great with genre conventions. It's a weird book. Um, so I will say that I have reread before I sent this to you. I actually earlier this year actually reread the whole manuscript and I was editing it thinking like maybe I'll give this a different shot.
Yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
And all of the problems I found. So Claude was like, hey, strengthen the midpoint of character transformation. That is 1,000% true. That is spot on. Titan, the big bad's investigative threads. They appear at the beginning and at the end and are never touched on again. It is 100% true. Deep in
Is it
Rosie's
wild that AI picked
Dude,
up
it's
on
wild.
these?
Yeah, this one right
Yeah.
here, deep in Rosie's role in the narrative. Rosie is the love interest of my main character. She appears in 4 chapters in the beginning 10 chapters of a 43 chapter book. Then she doesn't come back until the very end. She is probably, and I've had readers tell me Rosie's the most enjoyable character. I was really pissed when she disappeared. AI picked up on it right away. They're like, "Hey, more Rosie in this book, dummy." Um, again, Chat GPT hit the you need stronger supernatural elements. 1,000% true. One of the big problems with the book was I was like, I'm going to write a supernatural thriller. I was calling it urban fantasy. It's not what urban fantasy is, which is why it was a bad match for the market, but for the right fast publish repeat market. But I was like, I'm going to call this. But the supernatural elements are rarely explained. They just kind of happen. The world building is bad. It took me 2 more books to learn world building, right? Like, you know, deep in Menken's emotional arc. When I wrote this book, I didn't even know what a growth arc was, and
Right.
it nails it. And it tells me exactly how to deepen Menken, the main character's emotional arc, and then enhance the states and consequences of Menken's actions. This is something I get told by readers all the time, right? Like now, readers still engage with the book on occasion because the dialogue is good,
Yeah.
right? Like I even back then I wrote solid dialogue. There are scenes that are just fun to freaking read because the voices are good and the characters are having a good time and the reader's having a good time. But at this point, I did not understand character growth and plot.
No, but you did score well on the dialogue
Oh
section
yeah,
of all the
excellent. Both of
rubrics.
them gave me excellent on dialogue. So, but I'm saying that to say, like, as a developmental editor that works with a lot of people and looking at my old books, this is just to say, like, hey, this is spot on. Like it nailed it. It 100% nailed my issues with the book. And I know because I had just done this work before giving you this manuscript. So as a proof of concept, and that's what's so freaking scary about AI. That's why you and I talked about the the market before we started talking about this because, like, yeah, it's good, man. It did it
Yeah.
really well. And I didn't tell you any of these problems before I get in case anybody's like, well, Jay probably cheated. Um, yeah, what I loved about it. So can I talk about two more things that I
Yeah,
loved?
yeah, please do.
So something was it in this or was it in the Q&A? Because you gave me this and then you wrote me like, what questions do you have? Okay. So in the initial reports, I had yeah, those that's the summary report. In the initial reports, I had asked you um you had asked me what do I want to know about it, or is that in the I'm trying that's where it is. After I got the reports back, you're like, hey, what do you have any questions for it? And so I asked you some questions about the book and like how do I follow up on the plot arcs in book two? I actually wrote book two and I didn't do any of this and I'm really mad about it because this is better. It was like how do you strengthen how do I strengthen the big bad? Great suggestions in here. If I ever go back and write a book six, I'm using those. Um, but then I ask it some questions too about like, hey, can you give me visual aids for the cover? Because my son and I have been playing around with Midjourney, thinking about like, hey, can we just recover these? Just put a fresh look on the books. They look really old. Can we just put a fresh cover on them? These are the visual effects for the cover were really great. It's like, oh, we're doing some of them. Like it recommends like, Baltimore skyline silhouetted against the dark sky, shadowy figure, Mencken in the foreground, perhaps looking up at the city. We've like thought about those, but then Amani's neon sign visible from the street scene. And this is what's crazy. Amani's neon sign is mentioned in one chapter, in one paragraph, but it is a central location in the book. And so, like, yeah, that's a great idea for the visual elements of the book. Like, and I don't think I would have pulled that. So anyway, it was just a good, yeah.
Well,
And then
and the other thing too is it is just now gotten to this level of sophistication.
yeah,
And that's why I decided to make this available as a service because when I was starting to have it analyze some of my full novels, it was pulling out details and nuances that were just buried and were like
mhm,
one level deep that I was just astonished by it.
yeah. The other thing I asked it to do was give me a paragraph pitch, like help me pitch an agent and help me write an Amazon description. Those are both great. The pitches are better than what I had for it. They're both really good. But what I loved is you did a comparative market analysis where you ask it like, "Hey, go look at books on the market and tell me what this is like." God, I wish I had had this 10 years ago because it does nail it. It nails like, and I went through and looked at all the books listed here. They are all really good suggestions. So anyway, that's less. I'm praising your service, but I'm also just talking about what AI can do that's really hard for us. It's like, damn, this is the best red editor I've ever met because it's like pulling things that I would have never even thought of.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, we'll go meta on this. I didn't have comparative market analysis as an idea. So I started when I started messing around with this, I started with three story method and I started with story rubric. And at one point I asked the AI, if you were an author and you hired me to analyze your manuscript using story rubric, what else that's not in story currently in story rubric would be
Mm,
helpful? And it came up with these. It came up
no
with
way.
comparative market analysis. I think reader engagement is another section it came
Yeah.
up with. So yeah, and I was like, wow, of course
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
be helpful, you
Yeah.
know?
It's fascinating. Yeah. So anyway, I'm impressed with what you built. I think it's really great. And I'm excited about it. Like I know that AI gets people thinking like, oh, this is the end of the universe. I'm pumped about this. This is a great tool. And if I had had it 10 years ago, my second book would have been much better than
Well, and
than
I
the one I wrote.
thank you. Thanks for saying that. I
Yeah.
also think it's an opportunity for people who are skeptical or afraid or uncertain to get a sense of what it can do. This is not AI writing the book for you. That's not what I'm offering.
No.
There's no element of this that is supplanting your humanness.
No.
This is about combining millions and millions of hours of developmental editing, having it synthesized by a machine in a way that you could not possibly get anywhere else. And I'm not saying this is better than any specific editor, but the aggregate power of this is undeniable. And could it make some mistakes? Yeah, it could. Are you going to agree with everything it says? Maybe not. You probably don't agree with everything your editor tells you, in that relationship either. But I think where it is right now, it is so sophisticated, and the strength in AI has always been in summary and analysis, and that's exactly what this is.
Yeah. And I would say like, even if you don't want to use the like what you're building, Jay, I hope people are leaving this conversation encouraged to go start playing with these tools with your own work. It doesn't mean you have to write with it. Like, look, I play with a lot of LLMs. I do not like writing with them. I'm
Right.
not, I just don't, that's not where I get my kudos, right? Like, that's not where like I get my treats for doing the work. When I write with AI, I'm not having a good time. So like,
Same here. I can
yeah.
I can crank out really good stuff really fast, but I don't enjoy it.
But you know what was great is I was in my car driving. I had to drive from my day job home, and it was like an hour drive. And I turned on the voice chat GPT, and I'm working on a novel right now. I just had it brainstorm with me. And I told her, I was like, hey, here's the premise of the novel. I'm just gonna like let's just brainstorm back and forth on like how the premise can be better, what kind of characters I need to include, like where are we, what are your thoughts on that? And I said like, and ask me questions about it, please.
Yeah.
And so it did. It was just asking me questions. Like, were all of those questions brilliant level, like, Einstein questions? No, they were like a lot of them were just normal questions, but I don't have anybody else that's going to do that with me. So like this
Right.
is a good like I don't
Or
have
you
anybody
can, or
else in the
you're not
car.
gonna you can't afford someone to pay for
Yeah,
that,
I can't
right?
pay for
So
an assistant to like, hey, I'm going to
yeah.
call you. I want you to ask me questions about the novel I'm working on. Right? And if I try to do it with my wife, she's gonna like murder me in a week. So like, but like, it's a good like, it's a solid like tool I could use to like help me brainstorm, help me think stuff out. And it had like, I, I took like 10% of its ideas, but those 10% of ideas I took were really great. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, these are great. And it
If
was
you
in,
get one aha moment out of a conversation with it, it's totally worth it.
yeah. And the other thing I was going to be doing besides talking to it about my novel was listening to music. And so, like, I actually got some crap done. But that's just an example of like, if you're not playing with these tools, go play with them because they're worth playing with.
Yeah,
Okay.
and neither of us have any sort of stake in this. So if you're like,
No,
what do
you're
you
not paying me
guys?
any money. You know what
No, I'm not getting any money from Sam Altman.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely, man.
I don't care if you use it or not. I'm just saying like
If I
it's an
could get
incredibly
Sam Altman
powerful
money.
tool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Woo, yeah. Anyway. Uh okay, so you had rapid fire question and answers. Questions you've already been asked. Hit
Yeah.
us. Hit us.
Yeah. So here they are. Uh, is this thing going to steal my novel and publish it? No.
No. No.
Is it going to plagiarize my novel?
Wait, can
No.
we stop on that? Yeah, can we stop on those last two? Because
Yeah.
I'm gonna say something a little mean. Nobody wants your novel.
No one wants your novel. I
I
know.
love you. I love you. I love you, writer. Nobody
Uh,
wants your novel.
this goes back to very early on in my editing days. I had a few clients who wanted me to sign like an NDA or a release form or something before they sent me your novel, and I was like, I'm not your guy. You need to find another editor.
Yeah,
Like,
look, dude.
if you
Yeah.
think I'm going to steal your novel, like, yeah, you're right. No one wants your novel.
I
Um,
promise whatever idea you have behind your novel that you think is an amazing twist or something else, there are four other people in the world right now that have that exact same idea.
yes.
And that's not anything to do with AI. That's just how like statistics work. There are
Right.
definitely four people that have that same thing in the billions of people on Earth. Therefore, now, should that discourage you? Absolutely not. But it should encourage you to be less precious. But that's,
Yes. Yes.
anyway.
And
People are gonna hate this episode, Jay. They're gonna be
yeah.
so mad. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
and and it if you think that AI plagiarizes, you don't understand that this is a pattern recognition machine.
Yeah.
It does not copy paste paragraphs from your novel and chunk it out to someone else. It
No.
does not work that way. So those are two things right there. And as we talked about way back in the day, being unknown is a way bigger problem than piracy.
Yeah.
Like, we used to do, the DCMA takedown notices and like pirated book sites. And then we figured out like, no, it's probably better. It's
That's
probably
great.
better to
Yeah.
have
They
them
actually
out there,
help your Google search results.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's to go what you were saying just now about like how these things work and how they're not stealing work. this isn't 100% true, but it helped me to conceptualize it when I started working with large language learning models. Imagine they take the language you give it and they turn it into math, and then they use that math to produce new
Yes.
answers. That's what's happening. So they're not going to take your paragraph and plagiarize it. It turns into math, and then the math comes back out. And like
Yes.
that's what you mean by like pattern recognition. It helps me back off of this fear of like, oh, it's stealing words. It's
Yeah.
not stealing words. Now, is it stealing styles? It's not stealing styles, it's recognizing patterns in those styles and reproducing those patterns. Does that feel, if you are, you know, Brian Regan, who's developed a very, like, I would say, narrative, unique form of comedy, does it feel like it's stealing your work if it diagnoses the patterns that you don't even know you're using and then reproduces those patterns? It does feel like it's stealing your work. It does feel like, are you author who has not published a book, Brian Regan? No, you're not. Does that make sense? If you're writing to genre tropes and you're a write fast, publish, repeat person, and you're like, is it stealing my work? Well, I hate to break it to you. You are doing what it is doing, just slower.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
that you are doing the same looking at genre tropes and writing to genre tropes is a pattern recognition strategy. You are doing what it is doing. So when you read a romance novel and go, okay, these are the tropes, this is what I need to follow, this is how this needs to work, are you plagiarizing that person's work? You're asking the same question,
Yeah.
right? Like, sorry, now people really hate me.
No.
All right, go ahead.
So here's another objection. I have a $20 chat GPT account. Why do I need you to do this, J Thorn? I can just do this myself. Well, if you wrote a whole book on story methodology, if you've spent the past 20 years coaching writers, if you've looked at hundreds, possibly thousands of manuscripts, then you don't need this.
Yeah,
And yes, you can train. And also, if you've had 2 years working with the AI and you understand how to train it, how to make a custom GPT, yeah,
go
you
for
don't
it.
need it.
Yeah,
It's all yours. Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
that's why we were talking about earlier why I pushed you on like, hey, expertise bringing to this tool.
yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
why do I need to hire a cabinet maker to make my kitchen cabinets? I can buy a hammer and nails.
Correct.
This is true. I
Yeah.
can buy a hammer and nails. Are those cabinets going to come out the same? They are not, but I can if I want to. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's another one. Well, if you're working like with the AI, what's this take you like 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Like, what am I paying you? I'm not paying you for 20 or 30 minutes of work, hundreds of dollars. Fine, don't.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel better, I will sit on your analysis for a month or two, and then I'll give it back to you, and I'll tell you that I worked on it for 10 or
if,
15 hours.
if
Like,
it makes you feel like I'm working harder.
yeah, like
Oh man.
if you're judging value based on the number of minutes versus the outcomes, then yeah, this probably isn't for you either. Or
Yeah.
like I said, I can just sit on it for a while and then send it back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hysterical.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And it is weird that we like value things like that. Like this is something I think because because we're like laying it all out and just ranting about the market today. Um, because money is tight in the market. People are constantly questioning the value of things, right? Like I have a very small war chest to spend on my novel to get it out into the world. Do I need to pay for this? Do I need to pay for that? And I actually encourage that kind of judiciousness.
I know you do.
Yeah.
We've had conversations about that
I know you and I
in the
yell at me.
past.
You used to yell at me all the time about like raise your prices, Jeff.
Yeah.
Um, but I encourage that kind of like, hey, you have a war chest. It's limited. Think about what you want to spend it on.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's smart, and I think, but don't equate time and value. They're not they're not the same. Even though it feels like I'm paying for this service, this person should I'm paying a flat fee. How much time are they spending on this? You're not paying for the time. You're paying for what the expertise of this person provides.
You
And
said it
that's, yeah.
very well earlier. You're paying for perspective.
Yeah. You're
Right.
paying for perspective. And that's true with all editors. Like that's not
Yep.
even true. Just you're paying for perspective. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, like people tell me like, oh, I can get a cheaper developmental edit on Fiverr. And I'm always like, yes, you can. You can go to Fiverr and get it cheaper. You don't get in that edit. I mean, you might, but I don't think you get in that edit what I bring to the table and the perspective I'm bringing. But you are right. And I've told people before, like, and if you were on a shoestring budget and trying to ink this thing out, you probably should go get that. Like, don't, yeah, anyway.
Well,
It's
this
weird
is
to be like, don't hire me, but that's,
so I got one more. It's tied to that. So that was a
okay.
perfect segue. You know, if I hired a developmental editor, a book coach, they would do a way better job. Why should I do this? And I'd be like, you're absolutely right. They would. So you should hire them, and you should spend 6 months, and you should spend ten or $15,000, and then yeah, you are going to get a much better experience with your manuscript. True.
Yeah. Well, can I caveat that? Because
Yeah. I'm being kind of a jerk about that one, but yeah, so
yeah,
please caveat it.
you're going to get a much better experience. And this is just like about looking for editors and things in general. If like what exists for the writing a novel, the write fast, publish, repeat model, also it exists in every market. It also exists in editors.
Yeah.
And so if you get into an editor mill where their goal is to ship your thing as fast as possible, no, you're not going to get a better experience, right? Like what you want, if you're going to pay higher for an editor, what you want is somebody who's going to give you personalized attention. So I'd ask them questions like, how many books are you working on at a time? Right? Like, how many of these are you doing at once? You want an editor that's devoted to your work and is like, I take one book at a time. You're the book that I'm working on right now. You're going to pay more. But yeah, if you want personalized attention, like if you value personalized attention and you can pay for it, then that's what you should be looking for. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. Anything else we need to talk about now that we've trashed the market, we've burned dreams, we've tried to rebuild them, and then we've made people really angry about editing services. Is there anything else
No,
you and
and
I could burn to
I
the
think
ground before we?
I mean, if you've stuck with us this far, I think that the closing sentiment I have is this is a really incredible tool, and you're going to be blown away by what it tells you about your writing. And if you're not hung up on AI and you're not worried about your novel getting stolen, and you understand that there might be nuances or some little things in here that might not be entirely correct from your perspective, if you're good with all of that, this is a really affordable way for you to really make some progress and feel good about your novel and get some validation on the direction you're headed, or conversely, get some areas to focus on to make it better. And it's not going to cost you 6 months and thousands of dollars to do it.
100%. And I'm gonna add. Can I add? I'm gonna add to that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
say I hope after listening to this that everybody's super optimistic and not pessimistic because I think we're in a cool time where new things are emerging. And when it comes to the creation of story, that is good for us. When it comes to the generation of fast money, that is bad. When it comes for the generation
Yeah.
of story, that is good. This is good. These are all good things. This is
Yes.
exciting. It's an exciting time to be around because new tools are being developed that help us do what we want to do better, faster, stronger. Right. And,
Yep.
I'm grateful for people like you, Jay, who run out ahead of all of us because 9 times out of 10, people like you that run out ahead of us get burned as witches until we realize that witches is just science, right? Like that's the thing is that like we burn you at the
Except
stake,
for witches.
except for witches. They're real witches. Except and we should not burn them. They're very nice, many of them. So that being said, like I appreciate when people like you talk, I hope that we can put down our like fears about the future and actually listen because there's no like our instinct because we fear change is to burn you at the stake. But the truth is like we should be grateful that you're out there screwing with stuff so that we can so that we can benefit from it. Right.
Well,
Like even if we're
thanks,
not going to
man.
pay for your service, like
Yeah.
benefiting from listening to you talk about it and like what you're learning, what you've done, what you haven't done, I think is really important for us as authors. So I hope, you know, people come away
I don't
happy.
have a Messiah messianic,
Messianic. Yeah. I know that
messianic.
because
Thank
I
you.
went to seminary.
Yeah, I
Messianic.
thought you would know that. I don't have that complex, and I'm not entirely altruistic about being out front. It's just how I'm wired. I just can't
Yeah.
help
It's
it.
just who you are.
And sometimes when I find something, when I'm way out front there and I find something that's cool, I want to look over my shoulder and be like, guys, check. Can you see
Yeah.
this? Like, check this out. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what this is right now. So if it's not for you, I'm not going to be offended. Or if you
Yeah.
hate it or you're not even interested, like, that's totally cool. Like, there's only a certain type of person who's going to be drawn to this anyways. But
Yeah.
I hope it helps. And if you give the service a try, I think you'll be really impressed with the amount of actionable feedback you get, regardless of how it got there or who did it.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to hit stop and you and I can chat a little bit more. Thanks, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to hit stop. Now I'm hitting stop.